So in the last video, we talked about the relationship between a material's performance and its processing properties and structure, and that engineering is materials engineering is learning to understand enough about the relationships here that you could design the material for the performance that you want. So this video is an overview of the properties. To think about the properties, I'd like you to go ahead and go to the Ashby book and go to page 5 of the Ashby book. And this is figure 1.2. Inside this chapter, it just gives you a general overview of the different material properties. And this graphic represents essentially the mechanical properties of a material. And you see here, this plane shows, this is the way it should be with these wings nice and straight. And this figure B here shows that the wings aren't stiff enough. So this has to do with essentially the elastic behavior of a material. And the controlling factor here is something we call Young's modulus E. And this right here has to do with what we call the plastic behavior of a material. It says it's not strong enough, and it has to do with one of the parameters that we often look at, which is the yield stress. This figure indicates a failure due to cyclic loading, and this has to do with a property that we call fatigue. And is measured oftentimes through a parameter called K1, and this is for a particular type of loading, K1C. And this right here refers to the density of a material, which is, of course, the mass per volume. So these are some of the mechanical properties, but these are not by any means all the mechanical properties. Now, if you go to the next page, figure 1.3, you'll see a graph of what are some of the thermal properties of materials. So I'll just kind of run through them here. You see surface temperature as being a thermal property, expansion coefficient, the thermal expansion coefficient, conductivity, another thermal property, and diffusivity as a thermal property. And these pictures very nicely depict kind of the either ends of these different types of properties. So here high conductivity and here a low conductivity. So turning to the next page, actually page 8, you'll see a visual summary of a series of electrical, and magnetic, and optical properties of materials. Resistivity, dielectricity, magnetic behavior, and then optical behavior expressed in a refraction and absorption. So on the following page, page 9 in the text, you'll see a depiction of the different chemical properties. So looking at the idea of chemical resistance to exposure to these different materials. Fresh water, salt water, exposure to acids and alkalis versus organic solvents, two very different categories of chemicals. And then looking at oxidation behavior and degradation via UV radiation. So in this chapter, you see sort of a nice overview of the range of properties for materials. If you would like to organize them in your mind, this would be a nice time to make a concept map of these different properties and how they relate to one another.